Hello and welcome to Bristol Health Cares. I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. I am the president and CEO of Bristol Health. This program is for you. It's really about how you navigate the system of care, how you access care, and it's really about trying to answer questions you may have and really didn't know who to ask. We are going to bring to you professionals, doctors, surgeons, other healthcare professionals throughout our system of care, maybe people that you've never talked to before or met before, but the goal is to really help you understand how to access care when you need it. You're going to enjoy this program. This program is really for you. So what's important is if there is something that you want to learn about or know about or a guest that you'd like me to host on this show, write us and we'll try to make that happen for you. So enjoy the program, Bristol Health Cares. Hello and welcome to Bristol Health Cares. I am Kurt Barwis, your host. I'm the president and CEO of Bristol Health. And today, for the second time, we are very, very lucky to have this guest twice. I have Dr. Manon Cox. She's a virologist. Welcome, Dr. Cox. It's so great to have you again today.
Thank you for having me, Kurt.
We covered a lot of ground in the last show, but it was really about your career evolution and the interplay with the evolution of vaccines in certain areas, the influenza vaccine, and you talked a little bit about your journey was really kind of started with the AIDS vaccine, which we yet to have. And I was wondering, if we kind of stepped off of that foundation that you built, what is it? What does the world of vaccines look like today? I mean, where are we going? And you talked a little bit about, the difficulty of doing the science behind getting a vaccine actually established, going through the FDA approval process. You made me think about, I remember doing a biotech startup at one time in my life, and the answer was, don't try to bring a product to market in the United States, do it in Europe because it's easier to do it in Europe, and but so I wonder about that. Is the United States kind of the gold standard? Is the FDA the gold standard for the development? Is it easier elsewhere? And what are the challenges around bringing a vaccine to?
Again, this is a very big question, so I'll try to answer it. I think the United States, but also Europe and Japan have regulatory bodies that are very well equipped with scientists and with people who understand vaccines. So this is one of the reasons why it would be the gold standard to try to develop a vaccine for the United States or for Europe or for Japan. Also, these are markets where you can actually make some money. It's really interesting. Vaccine development is a very expensive process, but people don't want to pay for vaccines because it's like an insurance. You don't know whether you're going to get the illness, and yet you are taking this vaccine. And I guess when we think about how vaccines started and why vaccines are considered important by some and not by others is if there is a disease like polio that affects a very large group of people, and where you see the detrimental effects like the iron lungs, people becoming paralyzed, etc., then everybody will flock to take a vaccine, right? We have now a new vaccine for older adults, for Shingrix, to prevent shingles. Yeah. And it's called Shingrix, which is the trade name of a product, but it is to prevent shingles. It is an amazing product because if you know people who have suffered from
twice,
shingles,
I've had it twice, and I was vaccinated, but now they're telling me I need to get Shingrix.
Yeah, exactly, because there was another, Zoster was the early vaccine, and that is not as effective as Shingrix, apparently. So, and there were well-designed.
All right, so I definitely need to do this.
Done. You should do it.
Okay,
yes.
Good to know.
Because that Shingrix vaccine prevents shingles like close to 100%. And what is more interesting is vaccines have a lot of off-target effects that people are not aware of. Like, I was reading an article that they have been able to demonstrate that people that take Shingrix have a 20% less likelihood of getting Alzheimer's or dementia within the next 7 years in follow-up. Now, is that because those people are taking better care of themselves? And is this a side effect, or is this just an off-target effect that we today still don't understand?
So wait, I'm sorry, just because I think I read the same article, but
Yeah.
is that just isolated to Shingrix, or is that any vaccine? I thought it
It's
was...
actually, it has been specifically investigated for shingles vaccines, and it's very prominent there. But we also see for influenza.
That's what I
and
read.
for some other vaccines that you, for example, have when you take an influenza vaccine, your chances of having a myocardiac attack are severely reduced. So this has a lot to do with what vaccines can do to your immune system is they can reduce inflammation. And inflammation is a very bad thing for your body. Maybe short-term inflammation is not so bad because that is a reaction to fight, a foreign microbe that you don't want to have. But long-term inflammation is disastrous for your body. And if a vaccine can mitigate that, then that's probably the off-target, benefit that we get from it. But coming back to the regulatory process, the reason why you want to go to an organization or a country where they have a well-established framework for developing vaccines, you're probably better off, because then other countries who don't have that will very rapidly say, oh, the FDA looked at it, or oh, EMA looked at it. It should be good. It will be good. Now, I mentioned that influenza Flublok took 15 years to get approval, whereas the COVID vaccines only took 2 years. The FDA worked extraordinarily hard to do the approval rapidly, but you can imagine the normal scrutiny, like looking at 1 year of follow-up in people, could not be there because we were in such a rush. And I think a lot of follow-up research is going to be necessary for products that were approved so rapidly, so that we can fully understand what the impact of such a vaccine is and has been. And the FDA has also, they will not follow the same rapid process for new products that will come along, because you always have to look in vaccines for what is the risk and what is the benefit. In the early days of COVID, we saw a lot of people dying, and we needed something to deal with that, right? COVID was a new virus that appeared. Most people did not have any pre-existing immunity. So if you got early on exposed to a high dose of virus and you in a hospital setting were probably at very high risk for that, because somebody who developed COVID in the early days was actually, you can compare it with a biological bomb, right? That person is now going to spread that virus to everyone. And I heard an amazing story, talk by a woman from the World Health Organization, who says the biggest problem around COVID has been that doctors and hospitals do not know anymore what infectious diseases are like, because they're so used to treating non-communicable diseases like cancer, like heart attacks, etc. So to properly isolate a patient did not happen. So I guess in New York, you were at great risk if you were anywhere close to a hospital or anywhere close to a COVID patient early on. But as this virus slowly spread through the population, it basically became clear that it was actually, if you just had normal, low-level exposure, your immune system could easily handle it.
It's interesting. I remember the early days, and when the pandemic first hit, almost all the focus was on donning and doffing, protective, how do we isolate, how do we create negative pressure environments, transforming the entire organization. And one of the biggest issues was people would get sick and they would just walk into the emergency room, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so everything you just said is absolutely 100% right on target. I mean, and then having, the supply of protective, gear to wear to be able to protect yourself. And we overdid it initially.
Yeah.
Not that that was wrong, but a lot of people died.
Let's hope that we learned a lot from this, and I also hope that we learn from it, because a lot of people died, right? But those people were in categories, and you only know this in hindsight. You don't know this as a pandemic starts developing. But a lot of those people were in high risk groups. They were either of old age, 80 years and older, or they were at high risk because they were diabetic or had all kind of underlying things. And then there were families. So your immune system and your genetic makeup had a lot to do with this as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want to underestimate, our healthcare workers and first responders who go to, let's call the person who gets sick a biological bomb, who go there and who are there, they really were at very high risk, right? Because if you have no immunity and you are exposed to a high enough dose, it doesn't matter how healthy you are, that virus will then be able to, kill you.
So I think I turned into a biological bomb because I was in Boston right like a day after the Biogen conference, and I know that was one of the index cases, and literally the guy who at the front door of the hotel I was staying at, who I would always talk to about my old car and everything, and he was in my car for like 20 minutes, and I remember saying to him, you really should get yourself checked out. You're really sick. And he's like, oh no, I get sick like this every year because I'm outside during the winter. And then I got in my car. And sure enough, that was it. Boom. And I had people telling me, afterwards, you got it at this conference. And it was true. Literally, I think I was the first CEO of a hospital in the entire country. I made news everywhere.
Well, I hope
and
you didn't bring it to your own hospital.
Yeah, well, literally I can remember my friends coming into my driveway with signs, I hope you get better, and dropping off food. Yeah. But so everything you're saying kind of rings very true to me. So it's a long process, and what I hear you saying is what the public should really be very proud of in our country is the rigors that the FDA puts the companies through. So it's
because remember, you give it to a healthy individual, so you need to be absolutely sure that it will not do harm to that individual. And of course, it's always a balance, right? Because in the days of a pandemic, you really do not know. Who's going to be affected, yes or no.
Yeah.
But
so when I ask you a question, because this is always a question I get from people, and probably this is one of those areas, maybe it's a no-fly zone, but I think it's important for people to talk about it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories from parents who, and we see that even in this, in this state, and many states are like that, where parents are very adverse to giving their kids vaccines. It's not at all uncommon. And you hear stories about, a child who is perfectly normal, gets the vaccine, spikes the temperature, 102, 103 for a couple of days. Next thing you know, they have autism or something else happens.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
I think this is a very difficult topic because we have vaccines that are extraordinarily important in preventing life-threatening diseases. Let's take measles as an example.
Yeah.
Measles can be devastating, and you have a vaccine out there that can prevent kids from dying. And I believe that those vaccines have been very rigorously tested, and it is really clear that they offer a great benefit. I think what we do not understand well enough is what causes autism, right? We know that high fever spikes can cause autism, and little kids often can get sick and can get extreme high temperatures. So it is really, I think we need to do more research to understand what causes autism. I've been at CDC advisory meetings where scientists and medical doctors will say, there's no proof that vaccines cause autism. I agree with that. There is no proof that there is. We do know that these fever spikes can cause autism, and we also know that your genetic makeup can cause autism. I think the danger of parents who are not letting their kids take vaccines is that they put other kids at risk.
Yeah.
Right? That they're basically taking a free ride for kids that might not be able to take a vaccine, and they will contribute to the spread of of viruses and of diseases by not letting their kids have those vaccines. So what I feel is there's more research needed into the causes of autism, and we need to better understand what genetic makeup makes a kid more likely to develop autism, yes or no.
Yeah.
Again, in well-controlled clinical studies, there is no evidence that vaccines cause autism, but there are these one-on-one cases, right, where people say, well, I've seen this, but there's no good evidence, and I feel that it is actually a job of governments to really investigate this better.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because you get that question and there's very strong feelings about it, because somebody might know somebody that ended up becoming autistic, and that word spreads,
Yeah.
but the way you kind of laid it out is really, I think, important, is that we need to know more about what's causing the autism and the relationship between the spikes in temperature, not necessarily, and it could be, I mean, every once in a while, like I just had the flu vaccine, and I didn't feel good for a day, and some years that
You didn't
doesn't.
get flu block.
I know, and I don't think you said enough about flu block, because I don't think people realize that they try to hit and match the flu strain that's going to happen, right,
Yeah.
every year. So there's a variable there, right? So maybe they got it, maybe they didn't. And then, because of, you described and you've spent a lot of time trying to explain this, so tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but the way that the actual flu vaccine, using the eggs and all the other stuff, works, here's what it's going to be. And what they actually come out with, there's something called drift. Did I get that right?
Yeah, drift. There's indeed, during the production process, egg-induced mutations are happening. So in other words, the virus that you produce in a chicken embryo is not the same virus as that is making us sick. So in other words, there are egg-induced mutations, and those are not good. Those might render the vaccine ineffective, but the fact that you may not have felt good could have to do with the fact that there are endotoxins in these vaccines, and I think there is better technology. It would be good if we would use the better technology to make those vaccines.
So you set out to get vaccinated. Of course, I work in a hospital, so it's mandatory for me to get that vaccine, right? But what my wife asked me last night was, so how effective is the flu vaccine this year? I'm like, I don't think we'll know until after the season's over, right? But the truth is, your technology, the technology that you developed, and if I remember correctly, you didn't use the eggs embryo, you used butterfly larvae.
We use cells that were originally, many years ago, isolated from the fall armyworm, which will become a moth, right, after it's...
Oh my.
But it's basically the cells, and we use the genetic information. So there's no change, there's no drifting away from what it's supposed to be. You make what you tell the cell to make. And that is indeed what you find there. And again, it could still be a wrong selection by the World Health Organization that might render a vaccine a little less effective. But you do mention mandatory vaccination, right? And vaccine mandates is going to become, I think, with our new administration, a big issue. And I think it's good that we have a healthy debate about that, because it really depends on, again, what is the risk and what is the benefit for a certain situation. If you are a hospital worker and you are around all these people that are weaker and that are sick, I mean, it's probably a good thing to take a vaccine.
That is the rationale. I mean, truly, that is the rationale. Is like, people come into our hospitals, and what you don't want to do is give them something they didn't come in to get fixed or to get healthy from.
Exactly. Yet at the same time, I also think that we as scientists and doctors have a responsibility to explain the benefits of a product, right?
Yeah.
We cannot just say, you need to take this vaccine. I think we need to be able to explain these are the benefits and this is what you accomplish. I always used to say, I take flu block not because I'm afraid of myself, I'm just afraid of giving the virus to somebody else. This becomes a little problematic when you have a vaccine that doesn't prevent, spreading of a virus, right? That basically only prevents you from being being better protected. I think it's good to have a healthy debate about it.
I feel like in some respects we've been debating too about this right here, which is really positive in a very intellectual and appropriate way. And I hope and pray that what you're saying actually happens, is that, the questioning and the pushback and the concerns bring about a better understanding by people about what it is they're being asked or potentially could benefit from.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with you, having experienced the shingles twice in my life. It is the most awful pain in the world.
Yeah.
And I literally almost lost my motor function in my arm from
Wow.
it. I was at like 30%. And it took a while to recover from it. So the
I still
benefit.
need to take that vaccine. I've been.
Well,
I
wait
know
a minute.
the
You
woman.
said you were promoting it.
I know the woman who developed it. Well, they were only going to reimburse it if you were 60 or older or so. There was an
Well, I
age,
certainly checked that box.
yeah, there was an age limitation for it. But the woman who developed it made me a little bit afraid of it because she said, well, the big, it can hurt the vaccine when you get it. So. Every time when I speak with her, I ask, well, did you take it already? And she hasn't, but I will, because now I'm age eligible and I really feel it's important. And it's really great that there are all these off-target benefits that we didn't realize, like, reduction in the chance of getting dementia.
That article I was thinking about, it was in AARP, and people, I have to, I quote, because I find a lot of good information in that magazine. And when I say it in work, I said, well, did you read? And they're like, yeah, Carl, we're not members of AARP yet. So but it's generally really a lot of good information that you get to read. So where do you see us going? I mean, money, it takes a lot of money. You described that. We certainly have things that need to be addressed in our world. And there are places where there's dire need. And so what is your hope? What do you see, and how can it happen?
What we're seeing in vaccines is we used to focus on childhood vaccines and preventing kids from dying from all kinds of diseases. And there's still a lot of unmet medical needs, right? Let's think about malaria, let's think about HIV, let's think about TB. So there's still a lot of things that we need to do for the younger age population. But what we have started to recognize, especially with an aging population, is that also as we get older, our immune system is not as working as well anymore as it used to when we were younger. So in other words, we see a lot of new vaccines coming out and about for older populations, and I think we need to do a better job in communicating the benefits and then leave it up to everyone to decide, am I going to take this vaccine, yes or no, dependent on what their situation is, right? So that's what I see. I hope that people will recognize the benefits of vaccines, because it has had an enormous impact on our life expectancy. It's like clean water, vaccines have been extremely important, and I think it's important that people realize that, and I hope that's where we will go, and that there will be continued funding for new vaccines. And again, let's not force people to take vaccines, but let's have a good discussion around it and give people their own free choice.
Dr. Cox, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please don't stop with your passion and your engagement, because I think we're all better for it. So really appreciate it. This is Bristol Health Cares, and this has been another exciting episode. I'm Kurt Barwis, your host. You can write us at cares@bristolhospital.org. with your suggestions and ideas, and we'll try to bring on guests and provide information that answers those questions or at least helps you get direction. I want to shout out a big thanks to Nutmeg TV. This wouldn't be possible without them. And again, it's a community organization. It's a nonprofit organization that only exists with the support of others. So please be generous in this holiday season towards Nutmeg TV. And a special thanks to our production crew here. Quite an extraordinary facility with great capability. So have a wonderful and healthy holiday season. Again, this is Kurt Barwis, your host, signing off.